So the very first glimpse that we get of the hotel in the Shining miniseries is about right here. This is where the topiaries are on both sides of this walkway on the grass. And this is about what we see. It starts here. We see a bunch of children running up this walkway, and the camera slowly pans in until we have a more close-up, a look of the hotel. Then from there we see the horses, the children on horses riding horseback in front of the hotel, and we see the other children playing Denver croquet. But the first glimpse we get of the hotel is right here as those children are running up that walkway, having a good old time, probably really thinking the topiary animals are cute at that point before things went awry. So before we see Jack having his interview with Mr. Allman, we see children riding on horseback along this area here. Children are playing croquet over here, which this would have been grass at the time. They called it Denver croquet. That used a special type of mallet that later on became a pivotal character in the story. So in this scene, Jack Torrance comes to have his job interview with Mr. Allman, who is not too keen on the idea of Jack Torrance taking over the care of the Overlook for the winter. And they start on top of the stairs there, on a kind of a tight shot. And then they start to walk down the stairs, and the camera kind of pans out. Sorry, my camera work is not Hollywood Hollywood ready. And they start walking down here. And about there is where it was all grass. This was not here before. So they just kept walking out this way, and then the camera panned out. Beautiful morning out here. And as they were walking out, the camera got really low, kind of did like a real tight shot. Their heads are actually over the roof line. So creative camera work. So Mr. Allman is really not convinced about hiring this recovering alcoholic to take care of his precious hotel. But little Danny, back in Boulder with his mom, his Shining is letting him know that everything's okay and his dad got the job. And that does end up being the case, but not before Jack Torrance sweats it a little bit. There is a board, I think, that was pushing for Jack to get the job, even though Mr. Allman was opposed to it. And eventually he does get the job. Maybe it would have been better if he didn't. But he was out of options. He had lost his other jobs, his last job, and kind of was unemployable at the time. So he felt like this was his only option, sadly. So, not all of the Shining miniseries was filmed at the Stanley Hotel. There were some other locations in the Denver area as well. So the next stop on our Shining miniseries location tour is this apartment building, Poplar Apartments. And as you can guess, it is on Poplar Street in Denver. This is where Danny and his mom and dad are living before Jack gets the job at the Overlook. There is a scene where Wendy is waiting to find out if Jack got the job or not. She's inside, and Danny asks if he can go out and play. So he comes out those front doors and he comes over here. It was a different tree at the time. It was bigger, and there's a swing hanging from it, and he hangs from the swing and he's playing, and that's where he gets a vision from his friend Tony, who warns him not to go to the Overlook, that it's poison, that it's dangerous. And he has his first, he throws his head back, his eyes roll back, and he has his first vision about the place. So this is actually at Poplar Apartments. It's kind of cool to be here. Then Jack comes home. He pulls in from, let's see, that street over there. Let's walk over there. And then he pulls actually right into this parking space where this white Patriot is. And Danny goes running to greet his dad. And he looks inside, and Jack has a bag of groceries in the passenger seat. But when Danny looks inside, he sees a bloody mallet, I guess, the croquet mallet. A little flash forward of things to come. And then when he looks back again, it's a bag of groceries again. So this is where the red beetle would have pulled in Mr. Torrance would have come in that way and pulled into here, parked here. And then Wendy came out and the happy family went inside, happy about the news that Jack got a new job. Although Danny is has cause for concern. So just one more angle here, similar to the scene once Danny walks out of the apartment and he moves over to the grass. You kind of really can't make out the words poplar anymore. They become obscured by the tree branches. Anyway, there you have it. The Torrance household from The Shining miniseries right here in Denver, Colorado. So the part of Danny Torrance in the miniseries version of The Shining was played by Cortland Mead. He was a young child actor in the 90s. He started acting at the age of 2. He did an amazing job with the role. He wasn't scared at all, even though he had to deal with some pretty scary things. And I think one of the early shoots was when he had that spell in the bathroom and foam was coming out of his mouth, which I guess was just toothpaste and saliva, I think I heard. He was actually able to roll his eyes all the way back, so all you saw was the whites of his eyes. I don't know that many kids that can do that. So Cortland Mead did an amazing job with the role. Unfortunately, he no longer acts. He's kind of retired from acting. He did have a good career in the 90s. I think the last thing he did I saw on his wiki page was maybe 2010. So he's listed as a former actor. Can you just see him playing in the yard? Well, if you haven't seen the show, maybe not, but you need to check the miniseries out. Right there, he's playing with a little toy airplane or something where he had his first vision. Pretty cool. Standing in front of, well, it's kind of one, but it's kind of two. So let me show you what this is. So after Jack has his interview with Mr. Allman, and Mr. Allman tells him, I really didn't want you to be hired, but the board has pretty much made up their mind. We see him in a phone booth talking to one of the people that made it possible for him to get this job despite all odds. That phone booth was pretty much right about where I am standing. It is no longer here. And in the background, you see this building, this Washington Park Veterinary Clinic here in Denver, Colorado. You see these 3 diamonds up here, although I feel like in the show they were closer together, so perhaps they have remodeled since. So he has this conversation. He tells him that he did in fact tell Mr. Allman about his drinking history, and I think the man he's speaking with, I think his name is Mr. Sharpton, if I'm not mistaken. And he says, you shouldn't have done that. And Torrance says, well, I want to be honest with everybody. So as he's having the conversation, the camera slowly pans to the right and we see this tavern. We see that the phone booth that Jack Torrance is making his call from is right by a tavern. Coincidence? I think not. So he kind of walks towards the tavern and he actually looks through the window and he sees a gentleman on the inside having a drink who raises his glass to him. And we can assume Mr. Torrance is tempted, but he does not succumb. So Jack got the job, and I sometimes wonder, would he have been better off if he hadn't? I mean, that wasn't the story Stephen King wrote, right? But boy, if he had just gotten a job, I don't know, McDonald's or something, instead of going to work at a haunted hotel, whose spirits were able to overtake him in his weakened state. I don't know. But then we wouldn't have The Shining, so I guess it all worked out. So I'm standing right where the phone booth would have been. There's the tavern we saw through the phone booth from one angle. There's the veterinary hospital we saw the other angle, right here in Denver, Colorado on South Pearl Street. Oh. So the angle's a bit off, so you have to use your imagination a little bit. But that parking lot back there, that is where the Torrances park their car when they first come to the hotel. That's where Dick Halloran parks his red car and has a conversation with Danny. And these 2 grassy areas, that is where the topiary animals were. This pathway here, as the Torrances walk into the hotel, that's the pathway they went up, and up those stairs there. I think there's some people coming as they made their way towards the beautiful Stanley. There was a scene, obviously everything was covered in snow, where Danny was out there playing, and the animals started to kind of move. Those topiaries started to kind of come alive, and he was in a little bit of danger. I believe it was over here on the right. There was a miniature, like, dollhouse of the Stanley Hotel, and that dollhouse is now inside the Stanley Hotel on exhibit. So, because later Jack comes out and he tries to clean it, clean the snow off of it, and that's when things start happening to him. That's when the swing starts swinging and the teeter-totters start tottering, and the doors and windows on that little miniature version of the Stanley, they start opening and closing, and he starts to get a little freaked out, and then the animals start coming to life. I mean, one minute they're covered in snow, the next minute they're not. So that all took place on this front lawn here at the Stanley Hotel. Let's go down and take a closer look. I should add that while little Danny is out here playing, mysterious forces lock his mother, Wendy, in the hotel manager's office, and she cannot get out. And she takes actually I believe it was one of those croquet balls, and she throws it through the window at the door to get out. And she gets Jack, and the two of them come running out the front door of the hotel, which you can't really see from here. And they yell at Danny, and he turns around, and those critters go back to being statuary and no longer coming to life. So that all happened here. Now there is just over there the town of Estes Park. I read that they had to get creative with their camera work to not let that be seen, because the whole point of the story is that this hotel is in the middle of nowhere. But they're not. It's not. You can kind of see. That's the town of Estes Park right over there. So they had to be very creative with their camera work to not let that be visible. Okay, we are out here now in the parking lot. A couple things happened here. I mean, first the Torrances arrived and they parked here and they walked into the hotel, so nothing too dramatic there. But this is also where Dick Halloran had his red sports car convertible parked, right with the hotel behind him. And this is where he had that talk with Danny, and Danny showed him the intensity of his shining skills, so much so that he blew out Dick's taillight. And Dick had to tell him, "Whoa, dial it back, son. You're gonna blow my brains out." So that took place right here in this parking lot. And this gravel parking lot is also where the playground equipment was. And of course, this movie was made in 1997, so the playground equipment would not pass today's standards. It's more the metal kind where children could get hurt. But it would have been, that whole playground and that miniature house would have been right here. That's me, looking kind of tall today. It all would have been right here. So this is the walkway the Torrances would have walked on. Now at that time it was gravel, just like the parking lot. It has since been paved, but that is the pathway that they would have walked on their way into the hotel for the first time the first time as a family. Jack had already been here, and then eventually they went and walked up those steps over there. So that's where we're gonna go next. When the Torrances first arrive, we see them walk through those front doors and kind of make their way over to these stairs, and they're wondering if anybody is here. They run into Dick Halloran. He's coming out there as he's about to depart the hotel for the winter, and he has a conversation with Danny, and that's when he first detects that Danny can shine. So after Dick Halloran and Danny have their little chat out by his car, Dick walks him back to the hotel, and he walks him up those steps, and they go back inside. He says farewell to the parents, and of course telepathically sends Danny a final message. So right there on those steps, that's where that would have occurred. We're gonna go take a ride in the elevator. Same elevator Stephen King would have ridden in that night. This is the original elevator. It has been here since 1909. Go back down to the ground floor. Rebecca De Mornay was they were all in the elevator, but there was one scene where she had to climb into it when the elevator was stuck between floors. that's not the case today. Steven Weber, Rebecca, and the amazing actor that played Danny, they were all in here. Alright, so after the Torrances have been given their tour and Dick Halloran has had his talk with young Danny, it's time for him to leave and head out to Miami. And so we see the Torrances and Dick walk down the stairs, and then they do a tight little zoom in shot on Danny on the lower steps with his parents behind him. And then Dick Halloran goes off on his way to sunny Miami. But not for long. And then finally, after Dick says his goodbyes to the family, he gets in his car, drives off, kind of drives down that road back there a little bit, and takes one final parting glance at the hotel, hoping that everything is going to be okay, but kind of suspecting it might not, with a child like Danny at the Overlook Hotel. While Wendy and Danny are out running some errands and getting some groceries, Jack is up on the roof of the hotel performing some repairs when he gets stung by a wasp, comes on down, and heads into this storage shed. This is also where the bobcat is stored that he later demolishes. In real life, this is the ice house at the Stanley Hotel that once held ice. Today, it holds a frozen dead guy. You'll need to Google that to believe it for yourself. So we basically see the same location again a little bit later. Wendy and Danny have gone into town to go grocery shopping, and Jack was trying to fix something on the roof, got stung by a hornet, took the hornet's nest down, and after he treated himself, he came and sat out here with what he thought was a dead hornet's nest and worked on his writing. And so when Wendy and Danny came home, they parked the truck out in front of the stairs. And that was when we would have seen this again. They walk up, Danny sees the hornet's nest, he asks if he can keep it. Jack says yes. And as we all know, later on that does not bode well for the Torrance family. So this is where Steven Weber would have been sitting, approximately kind of where this chair is a little bit, maybe a little bit further back, hard to tell exactly, since the furniture is all different. Later that evening, after Jack discards the wasp nest that came to life, he hears a loud noise downstairs. When he goes to investigate, he finds that all the chairs that were once on the table have all mysteriously fallen down. So there is a scene in the it's actually from a floor above, I believe, so I'll have to try and go up there. But little Danny comes out of this room and walks out, and it's a really cool shot from the top of the staircase. So we're going to see if we can go up and kind of recreate that shot. So this is it. Had to come all the way up to the 4th floor to get this shot, but totally worth it. That would be the little room that little Danny Torrance walked out of when he went to get into some mischief, and he went running back pretty quickly, as I recall. Right down there, out of that door. What a cool, cool, cool shot. I love it. So glad they did it. And there's the door down there. Oops, right there. Crazy. It's crazy to be standing here on the 4th floor, which is also supposed to be the most spirited floor, by the way. So I'm not going to be lingering. But that's the shot. That's that super cool staircase shot. So cool. And here we have the location of one of the more romantic scenes of the miniseries. Jack came down here. There was a sofa here, so the furniture was a little bit different. And then Wendy came down the stairs in a beautiful white negligee and went and stood over by the front desk talking to Jack, and then came over here and sat down beside him, basically, you know, kind of trying to seduce him a little bit. So that took place right here in front of this fireplace. So there is another pivotal scene when Danny is out playing in the playground and there's lots of snow on the ground, and his mother, Wendy, is keeping a watchful eye on him from atop that upper balcony. She comes out and checks on him and gives him a little motherly warning. And he says, "Okay, Mom," while he's out there playing before the topiary animals become an issue. So it's right there. Rebecca de Mornay was walking up on that balcony up there. That's kind of cool. Lots of snow, covered in snow at the time. And this building is actually in something they call, I think, a snow shadow. I guess it's protected by the mountains, so they really do not get a ton of snow here. So a good majority of the snow that you saw in the Shining miniseries was actually fake. They did have one day, and some of the shots that they had shot the day before, they decided to redo now that there was a nice coat of fresh snow on all the trees and everything. But for the most part, a lot of the snow that you saw was fake. So I'm out here in Denver, Colorado, standing in front of another filming location from the Shining miniseries. If you know the miniseries, you might recognize this place. Maybe, maybe not. I'll turn the camera around and show you and tell you what we're looking at here. Okay, so as you know, when Dick Halloran leaves the resort, he goes to Florida for the winter. And he tells Danny, if you need me, just call. And he don't mean pick up the phone. He means call, you know, in their unique style of communication. And so when things are getting to be at their worst, Danny does just that. He sends up the SOS to Dick Halloran, who just happens to be enjoying a meal inside this Florida restaurant. Only thing is, it ain't in Florida. No, it's not in Florida at all. It's right here in Denver, Colorado. They sure made it look like Florida. They had some signs about orange juice and everything. But everything was pretty much filmed in Colorado, in and around Denver and Estes Park. And so they kept it all local. So after Dick Halloran gets that call and he almost has a heart attack, all the patrons inside are asking him if he needs help or if they should call an ambulance, and he says, no, that's not what I need. So he comes out of these doors and he goes to his waiting red car here. His red car is parked right here at this curb, which in real life is not I don't think you could park there. But it's not real life, it's a movie, a miniseries to be more precise. So yeah, he just kind of walks out that door, goes straight to his red convertible, turns the keys, and he's off to be Dick Halloran to the rescue. Of course, he's in Denver already, but in the storyline, he's in Florida. So he hightails it over to the airport. Which also, by the way, happens to be the Denver airport, not the Florida airport. Not that that should surprise you at this point. Don't worry, Danny. Don't worry, Danny. I'm coming to the rescue. Hold on. I'll be right there. Okay, so now we are looking at a room that was a pretty pivotal part of the Shining miniseries. This was the bar room. So when we first saw it, there was actually a jukebox over here in the corner. The jukebox just went on its own. Nobody was even in the room the first time it made its appearance. And then there's a fireplace over there. You can't see it right now. That just automatically lit itself. So we knew there was something interesting going on in this room when we first saw it. And then later, one night, Jack Torrance made his way down here and he found some alcohol here, even though he had been told that this place was dry. And Jack Torrance, being haunted by the spirits he was haunted by, he could not resist. So he drank, and he drank. And the bartender, who was not Lloyd, by the way, it was Delbert Grady, a little bit different from, the Kubrick version that we know. He was the caretaker here, and he was alone. He did not have a wife and children like we saw in the Kubrick version of The Shining. So when he ate a rifle for lunch, shall we say, there were no twin girls, none of that. And he just took care of himself. So anyway, Delbert Grady was giving him a talking to about the things that he needed to do, and Jack continued to drink. So with the jukebox over here playing, eventually there was a curved bar there. Jack reaches over to get a glass and he falls behind the bar, and I guess he passes out. We don't see him for a bit. And then little Danny can tell with his spidey sense that his dad is drinking again, and he comes down here, as does Wendy. And little Danny is tossed aside, and Wendy struggles with Jack, who jumps out from behind the bar and attacks her. and she hits him over the head with a bottle of booze, knocks him out cold, and drags him into the kitchen. And that's when we see the scene that, you know, kind of mirrors the one that we saw in the Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining, where Jack is locked in the pantry with all the food and the peanut butter. That was not filmed here at the hotel. That was filmed on a set. So this is the room where all of that happens. All of those bar scenes. And then when Delbert tells him that there's a party going on and they're waiting for him, that actually takes place in another room on the other side of the lobby. So I'm gonna try to show you that too. And over here is where the curved bar would have been. Jack would have been sitting kind of on this end while he was drinking. And the jukebox was over there. There's this really cool car in here that wasn't there during the filming. And there's the fireplace. I think that went on spontaneously, if I'm not mistaken. So that is Jack Torrance's barroom. Now, Stephen King famously did not like the Stanley Kubrick version of the movie, and he felt that it should have been filmed here at the Stanley, that this is the Shining Hotel. And he also wanted to show that Jack Torrance's descent into madness had to do with his drinking. So this was a very pivotal scene for that reason. That is what set him off and let the spirits get in. Now I will come over here and show you that fireplace I was telling you about that spontaneously lit itself when we were first introduced to that part of the hotel. Right there in the lobby of the Stanley Hotel. This is where the big ball was held. Everybody was dressed in their period garb. There was a big band playing with those big band stands in front of all the musicians. And the person conducting the band was the one and only Stephen King. There was an additional platform there that served as a stage, and he was standing up there directing the band. And at the very, very end, of course, we see him melting in that very spot. We do see Steven Weber walking through here after he leaves the bar. After Delbert tells him his presence is wanted at the party, he comes over here and he mingles amongst the guests. And then you see a shot of him in the room just alone. And he's standing about there. You see about something like that, I think, is the view. Letting us, the viewers, know, okay, these people are not really there. Right here. That's where that big scene was filmed. After Dick Halloran goes to Miami, Danny gets to a point where he has to summon him, and he does come to their rescue, but unfortunately he is attacked and he collapses right at the base of those stairs right there, and Wendy is trying to help him. What I am glad about is that at least in this version, Dick Halloran does not succumb to his wounds. He survives. That's one thing I do like about the Shining miniseries, being truer to the book, truer to the story that Stephen King had intended. So I was happy to see that. I never liked that part where Dick Halloran, you know, was slaughtered, because he was a good guy. He was like all that Danny had. Although he shows up in Dr. Sleep, I guess, in spirit form, so I guess he didn't really go away, but still, I liked that ending for Dick. While Jack is making his final assault on Wendy, two ghosts appear behind the front desk, telling him time is running out and he needs to tend to his son. and return later so they can all celebrate his success. I could not pass up the opportunity to stand behind the front desk myself, but I could not stay serious quite as long. Since I was already back there making a fool of myself, I asked if I could see the key to room 217. It's the fourth key from the right on the upper row, and it's the only key that faces the opposite direction. It is the one and only original key to room 217, the room Stephen King stayed in the night he got the idea for The Shining. All the other keys are fake. Of course, it's a modern hotel with modern keys now, but it was fun to hold the original 217 key. And finally, if you haven't seen the miniseries, maybe stop here. But finally, things come to a head. Jack Torrance succumbs to the old urge to drink, and that's what allows the spirits to get inside. But of course, there was an alternate ending. It was the ending that Stephen King had originally written in the book. And of course, Wendy and Danny do escape, as does Dick Halloran. So I don't want to spoil the ending if you haven't seen it. Just know that it was true to the book. But if you watch to the very, very end, you'll know that some things never end. Some things you can't kill. Just saying. So this is the actual miniature Stanley Hotel that was in the front lawn during the filming of the Shining miniseries here at the Stanley Hotel. It's the real deal. They have it on display in the lower level. I just think it's so cool. You might remember there was a scene where Jack had gone outside and he was trying to sweep snow off of this, and things started happening. The seesaws started sawing, the swing started swinging, and the doors on this thing started flapping in and out, and of course the animal topiaries started to come to life. So this was a pretty part of a pretty pivotal scene, because Jack was seeing that for himself for the first time, I think. This is the back side of the Stanley. Little wishing well. Waterfall, make a wish. Thought this might be a good spot to stop. There's nobody here. I'll tell you a few fun facts about the making of the Shining miniseries here at the Stanley. It feels good to sit. I've been going nonstop since I got here. I think I've covered every inch of this place. So I read about some interesting fun facts about The Shining, and so I thought I would share them. So forgive me if I'm reading some of this, but I knew I wouldn't remember it all, and I wanted to share it with you all. So, I mean, you're doing a video about the Shining miniseries. How can you not talk about these things, right? So, of course, The Shining remains one of the most iconic horror films of all time, right? Whether you like it, whether you love it, everybody knows it. Everybody knows some of those iconic images, the twins, the carpet, little Danny running around on his little tricycle on that carpet, the lady in the bathtub. I mean, just some iconic stuff. There's so much more. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But one of the movie's harshest critics, of course, was Stephen King himself. He famously took issue with the way that Stanley Kubrick adapted his novel. He was very, very critical of that adaptation. He let his feelings be known. Everybody knew it. We heard a couple interesting stories yesterday on the Shining tour. So when he finally had an opportunity to present himself to do The Shining his way, to make a version that would be true to his novel, he went for it, which resulted in that 3-part miniseries. Each episode's 2 hours with commercials, so about 1.5 hours without. You can get it a DVD. You can purchase a DVD. It only ran once on the air because they told us, you know, back in the 1997 miniseries that were running on television, The Shining, some parents took issue with that. They didn't think that was suitable for primetime television. So they complained to the network, and the network pulled it, and they never ran it again. But you can buy it. I purchased the DVD set myself. Good old Amazon, right? Don't mean to plug Amazon, but they pretty much have everything. So one of the caveats to King being able to get the rights back from the Kubrick estate, one of the rules I thought this is hilarious, is that he had to stop bad-mouthing Kubrick's version of The Shining. It's like, enough already, enough. We know you didn't like it. You know you didn't feel it was true to your book. And it wasn't. It took a lot of liberties. It was a Stanley Kubrick movie that was based on Stephen King's book, The Shining. But he took a lot of liberties, and I, for one, loved it. But King didn't, and, you know, that's fine. Some people... King wrote that book. He was inspired to write that book here after an incredible, incredible night. So it's personal to him. I get it. It's your baby. You want it taken care of. And he did not feel that Kubrick took care of it. So he wanted to write that. So he got together with director Mick Garris. Mick Garris, he had directed some of the other Stephen King adaptations, Sleepwalkers and The Stand. So he knew that Mick would be able to get it right. And he actually makes a quick appearance in the miniseries in the AA meeting, I believe. King's primary objective was to portray Jack Torrance as a tragic character. Like, what happened to him was tragic. He always felt that, you know, Jack Nicholson, he had just come off of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He felt like Jack Nicholson's portrayal of Jack Torrance. He was evil from the beginning. And that wasn't the story. That wasn't the story that Stephen King wrote. Stephen King wrote a story about a writer with writer's block, suffering from alcoholism, having, you know, marital, you know, issues, family, new father type issues with a young children or whatever, and trying to figure that all out. Basically, The Shining, the book, was not even a horror story. It was almost an autobiographical book based on Stephen King's life at that time. And as we know, it pretty much turned his life around. The events of that night here made him get sober. It didn't last forever, but he fell off and he got back on again, and eventually it did stick. So this is a very special place to Stephen King. That book was very special, and he just was not happy with Kubrick's version of it. So what do you want to do when you want something done right? You do it yourself. That away, Stephen. In the novel, Wendy Torrance was blonde, so he didn't really particularly care for Shelley Duvall being cast in that. He always envisioned her as a blonde that was maybe a cheerleader in high school, you know, maybe only 8 years ago or so, and strong, and was going to fight what happened. So, but he always envisioned her being a blonde, like his wife. Again, autobiographical. So that's how we ended up with Rebecca De Mornay, who is quite a different looking Wendy, and I think her portrayal was quite a bit different too, which is exactly what the doctor ordered. So one of the challenges Stephen King faced is, who are you going to get to play Jack Torrance? Who are you going to get that wants to step in Jack Nicholson's shoes, right? They had a big problem on their hands. Everybody they approached was like, no, man, that's Jack's role. I ain't touching that. I ain't doing it. They did offer it to Tim Daly, who starred in the television comedy Wings along with Steven Weber. Tim Daly had to turn it down because he had some scheduling conflicts. I'm sure he would have done a great job with it. He did offer it to, Gary Sinise. And Gary Sinise was not doing it, not stepping in Jack's shoes. Wouldn't dream of it. Oh. I don't know if you could see that. Wow. You don't hear that very often. All right, I thought it would be disrespectful to talk over that. Yeah, Gary Sinise he had offered it to because he was in The Stand. So Mick Garris had worked with him in The Stand, but he declined. He just felt it would be impossible to do that role without being compared to Jack Nicholson and falling short, honestly. So eventually it actually went to Steven Weber, who worked with Tim Daly on Wings. And Steven Weber accepted the role 4 days before filming began. 4 days. There was not any like pre-rehearsal. Pretty much when they got here, the takes were the rehearsal. That was it. There was no really time that he met Rebecca De Mornay here on the set when they started filming. So a little bit different than maybe some of the things that are done today, but they were in a bind getting someone to want to play Jack Torrance. And of course, when you think of The Shining, you think of 3 hotels. You think of the Stanley, because this is where Stephen King was inspired to write it. You think of the Timberline Lodge up in Mount Hood in Oregon, because the exterior was used in the opening shot of The Shining. And Stephen King was not happy about that. And you also think of the Ahwahnee Hotel over in Yosemite, because the inside of the Ahwahnee, I hope I'm saying it right, the inside that they built for the Overlook was basically an exact replica of that. But Stephen King always felt it should have been filmed here. This is where it was inspired. This is where a good portion of it was written. He always felt this is the Shining Hotel. This is where it should be filmed, and he was PO'd. So he absolutely said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it there. And that's how we have the Shining miniseries. And I think I might have mentioned this already, but despite the Overlook being in the middle of nowhere, the Stanley Hotel sits directly next to the city of Estes Park. Just 5 minutes away is a whole bunch of shopping and restaurants and that kind of thing. So the production had to use special lenses and special angles to hide the city, because they wanted it to look like this was in the middle of nowhere. What else? Oh, so this location is built in what they call a snow shadow. I think I might have mentioned that. Snow is actually kind of rare here. So when they were doing the filming, most of the snow that you see is fake. They did one night have snow fall. And so the next day they got out there and they reshot a bunch of scenes they had already shot, because they wanted to take advantage of the real snow that was actually covering the tops of the trees and everything. But most of the time it was fake snow. In fact, the scene where Jack goes outside and he's shoveling the snow off of the little miniature hotel. He's got these like ski shoes or something. They look like miniature skis, short skis. And the top of his foot is covered in snow. Well, that's not snow, that's foam. Because the snow was fake at that point. So that was kind of interesting. The CGI that they used to turn the fire hose into a snake, which was important because that was Stephen King's nightmare. It kind of contributed to all of this. That cost $30,000 just for those 2 quick shots. $30,000 for the CGI special effects back in 1997. Of course, you know, Stephen King himself had a cameo as the band leader the night of the big party. And at the end, we got to see him melting as the hotel began to crumble. His character at the end of the movie is credited as Gage Creed. Gage Creed, sound familiar? So again, there's a pet cemetery here on the grounds. His character in this movie was Gage Creed. So I feel like this hotel was also part of the Pet Cemetery book as well. As everyone knows, in Stephen King's book, there was not a hedge maze. There were these topiary animals that would come to life and be incredibly scary. Kubrick changed that. Did the hedge maze. He built that on the set in England. So of course, when they made the miniseries, they brought back the topiary animals. They were creepy. You know, I like both versions. I really do. They're very, very different. The miniseries is very, very true to the book, and the Shining movie, the Kubrick version, it's taken liberties. But I love them both. They're very, very different. I feel like the miniseries does show Jack as just a normal guy, suffering from alcoholism, writer's block, and all these problems, and the spirits at the hotel combined with his alcoholism, not a good fit. And what happens to him is, in fact, tragic. It's a tragedy. So glad that didn't happen to Stephen. I can't imagine a world without Stephen King books and novels and movies. Just can't. I also have a word about room 217. So the Stanley Hotel's room 217. That's where Stephen King and his wife stayed when he wrote that book. In 1911, there was an explosion that rocked the room. After a maid named Mrs. Wilson, she lit some gas lanterns. She survived, but that explosion took the floor out from under her, and she landed in the McGregor dining room down below, breaking both of her ankles. The McGregor dining room, that is where the miniseries scene where the party was held. That was in that room, and that was supposedly the first room that was built here. The hotel actually came later. So since then, her spirit is said to have remained and is reported to move items and unpack luggage. She's not a fan of unmarried couples sharing a room. She'll make the space between them cold, and she'll even pack up the man's luggage in the morning. I think, as I mentioned, there is no you know, the hotel didn't want 217 used when the original Shining was made, so they came up with a fictional room, 237, since there is no 237 here. But it's reported by multiple sources that when Jim Carrey came here to film Dumb and Dumber, he stayed there, stayed for a couple hours and left, and has never spoken about the events that occurred inside. He checked out after 3 hours and he never returned. So most people that have paranormal or experience paranormal activity, they want to talk about it. He has yet to talk about what he experienced while he was in that room. But that experience adds to the legend of room 217. A couple other things and we can wrap this up. So Steven Weber said this was actually a very challenging role for him. And part of the reason was they shot it out of sequence. And if you watch the miniseries, you see Jack start as kind of a normal guy with some problems. But he's trying to be a good guy, you know, good father, good husband. He's battling his demons. He's been in AA for 5 months. So he seems like a good guy. And then gradually, as the miniseries goes on, it aired over 3 different nights. He declines, you know, his descent into madness gradually declines. But they shot it out of order. So one day he may have been Jack from part 1. The next, you know, that afternoon he might be doing a part from Jack in part 2, where he's further along in his madness. And maybe the next morning he's doing a scene from part 3 where he's totally lost it. And then the next day he might be back to part 1. So if you can imagine trying to remember like where you were in your descent, that's incredible. That takes real acting chops. So I got to give it up to Steven Weber for that. It was a challenge, but I think he stood up to it, and I think he did great. Okay, so finally, like I said, it aired on ABC over 3 nights in 1997. Each night had 18 to 19 million viewers. Parents complained they didn't think it was suitable for prime time. The network pulled it. They never ran it again. It did receive positive reviews from critics, followed by years of fans who were not happy. They were condemning it. They felt it was inferior to Kubrick's original. I wouldn't say it was inferior. It's just entirely different. It's entirely different. It's like 2 different stories almost. So in recent years, I think the horror fans have come to appreciate it more. It was never meant to replace, you know, Kubrick's version. It's presenting a different version for fans to enjoy, and I did. I enjoyed it. It was actually nominated for 3 Primetime Emmy Awards, and it won Outstanding Makeup and Outstanding Sound, and it was nominated for Outstanding Miniseries. Unfortunately, it lost to Prime Suspect 5, Errors of Judgment. So that's about it. I think I've already talked about everything else. The hedge maze, how they built it after years of people coming here wanting to know where the hedge maze was. I think that's pretty cool. I think that covers all of the little, maybe unknown fun facts about the Shining miniseries that I found online. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed that little narrative, that little rundown of some of these lesser known details. And if you haven't seen the Shining miniseries, check it out. I mean, yes, it's different, but you might like it. You might not, but you might. I just love everything Shining, so I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to come here and kind of do this little homage to Stephen King's version of The Shining. Hope you enjoyed it.